Once upon a time, in a little town where the hills kissed the sky, there were two boys who couldn't have been more different. At least, that's what everyone thought. One boy's name was Thomas. He lived in a big, grand house at the top of the hill, with a pool that looked like something out of a magazine and a garage filled with cars that had names like Ferrari and Porsche. His parents were always busy, always working, always in meetings or galas or doing whatever rich people did. Thomas had everything a boy could dream of: video games, the latest sneakers, and a room full of toys he didn't even know how to use. But sometimes he felt alone. His parents were there in body, but not in spirit. He had the things, but he didn't always have the people. The other boy's name was Jamie. Jamie lived in a small, cozy house at the edge of town, with a little garden full of flowers his mom had planted. His family didn't have much money, but they had something that money couldn't buy: lots of laughter and love. Jamie's mom worked as a waitress at the diner down the street, and his dad fixed cars in a small workshop. Their house was always full of the smell of home-cooked meals and the sound of music from the radio. Jamie didn't have the latest gadgets or brand new clothes, but he had something he valued even more: time with his family, and the freedom to spend his days running through the fields, playing with his dog or fishing by the lake. One warm summer day, their paths crossed. Thomas had been bored out of his mind. His parents had promised to take him to the amusement park, but they were caught up with work again, so he was left to roam the house. That was when he decided to take a walk down the hill. The town was quiet, and he had nothing better to do. As he walked, he saw Jamie sitting by the lake, fishing with a stick and some string. Thomas paused for a moment. He'd never seen anyone fish like that before. He'd always imagined fishing was something you did with a fancy boat or at least a real rod. But Jamie wasn't doing any of that. He was sitting on a rock, wearing his worn-out sneakers, just watching the line in the water with patience. "Hey, what are you doing?" Thomas called out, walking over. Jamie looked up, a big grin spreading across his face when he saw Thomas. "Fishing," he said simply, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Thomas blinked. "With a stick?" Jamie shrugged. "It works. You don't need all the fancy stuff. Just a little patience." Thomas sat down beside him, intrigued. "I've never fished before. My dad says it's boring. You sit there all day waiting for a fish that might never come." Jamie laughed. "That's kind of the point. It's not about catching fish. It's about slowing down and just being." Thomas stared at the water. For a moment, the world around him seemed quiet. He could hear the gentle rustling of the leaves, the chirping of birds, the soft splash of the water against the shore. It was peaceful, in a way he hadn't known he needed. "So, you come here a lot?" Thomas asked, breaking the silence. "Every chance I get," Jamie said. "Sometimes after school, or when I need to think. My mom says it's good for the soul." Thomas thought about that for a moment. He had everything in the world, but he never seemed to have enough time for things that felt important. He glanced at the line in the water, but nothing tugged at it. Jamie didn't seem bothered, though. He just sat there watching the water, like the wait was part of the fun. "Do you want to try?" Jamie asked, offering Thomas the fishing line. Thomas looked at him, unsure. "I don't even know how." "It's easy," Jamie said with a laugh. "You just have to be patient." With a bit of hesitation, Thomas took the line. He tried to mimic the way Jamie had cast it out, but the stick wobbled in his hands, and the line splashed awkwardly in the water. Jamie just grinned, showing him how to hold it steady. They sat there for a long while, just talking about nothing in particular: school, their families, and all the little things that kids talk about when they're getting to know each other. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Thomas realized he hadn't looked at his phone once. The time had passed in a way that felt easy, natural. That's when the line suddenly jerked. Jamie's eyes widened. "You got something," he said, jumping to his feet. Thomas pulled on the string, feeling the weight of something tugging at the other end. For a moment, he almost panicked. Was this how it was supposed to feel? But Jamie's calm face helped him stay steady. With a little effort, Thomas managed to pull up a small fish, squirming and shining in the fading light. They both stared at it, and then Thomas laughed, his face lighting up with a joy he hadn't felt in a while. "I caught a fish," he said, surprised. Jamie grinned. "See? I told you. You just need patience." From that day on, Thomas and Jamie became fast friends. They spent afternoons together, sometimes fishing by the lake, sometimes just talking, other times running through the fields or helping Jamie's dad fix cars. And though Thomas still lived in a big house and Jamie in a smaller one, they both learned from each other in ways neither expected. Thomas taught Jamie how to fix up old bicycles, and Jamie taught Thomas how to slow down and enjoy the simple moments. Sometimes Thomas would bring some of his fancy gadgets to show Jamie, and Jamie would teach him how to make the best use of the time they had together without all the distractions. As for the fishing, it became a regular tradition for them both, and every time they sat by the water, Thomas would remember how something so simple, a stick, a string, and a bit of patience, could bring two boys from such different worlds together. And in that quiet place by the lake, both of them learned that the richest things in life aren't always measured by what you have, but by what you share.